In this exercise, we're going to be modeling a simple name tag in Solid Edge. When you first start Solid Edge, you're going to be shown this screen, and you'll need to choose between the different types of themes. If you're new to CAD, you may want to start with Some Assistance or Maximum Assistance. For the recording of this exercise, I use the Balance theme. Now that we've set the theme for our user interface, we're ready to begin modeling. So you want to start by going up to the Application button in the upper left corner. You're going to click on New and click on New again. And what this does is open up this templates, standard templates interface. So here you can select from any of the many different metric and inch templates that we have out there. I'm going to be using the ANSI metric template selection, so you make sure you click on that. And you're going to be opening up the part template, the ANSI metric part.par. That sets the user interface to be modeling parts. You can see that the interface is laid out like Microsoft products in that you have tabs across the top, and each tab has its own set of commands. We're going to be using the Home tab. And before we start, we want to turn on the base reference planes. So this is the pathfinder on the left side. And if I click the little checkbox, that turns on these reference planes. Now if you want to rotate the view around, you can hold the Shift key down and right mouse button and drag your mouse. This will rotate the view. If I let go of the Shift and I hold down the Control key and right mouse button drag, that zooms. If you hold the Control and the Shift at the same time and the right mouse button, that pans. So that's the way to manipulate the views. Kind of rotate the model around. So again, I'm going to hold the Shift key and the right mouse button. I'm just going to rotate it, and you can see that we have these reference planes. You can think of these as pieces of paper to begin sketching out the design for our name tag. So we're going to start by creating a rectangle by center. So on the Home tab in the Draw group, there's a command here for rectangle by center. Now, if you're unsure what the next step is, you need to read the prompt bar at the very bottom that tells you that you need to click on the point. So before we do that, though, we need to lock to a plane. So it needs to know what plane am I going to be sketching on. Am I on the front, top, or right side plane? We want to sketch on the top plane. So if you take your cursor and just hover over that plane, you can see it turns orange. And if that's the plane you want, you may press F3 to lock to that plane, or you can click on the little lock icon that appears next to the cursor. You'll see it'll turn that brown color. We also have an indicator that we're locked onto a plane in the upper right of the graphics area, and so that's the plane that we're going to be sketching on. To make it a little easier to sketch, you can go down to the View cube down in the lower right side of the screen and click on Top. And that's going to orient the view to the top, so you're looking directly at that piece of paper. It makes it normal to the screen. So the first thing we need to do is pick the center point for a rectangle. And we're going to use the origin right in the middle of the screen. So as soon as you get an indicator that you're on that, you can click and begin dragging. You can see I'm creating a rectangle by center. So you can see that the width is highlighted in blue, so it's ready for me to type in a value. So let's make it 100 millimeters wide and press enter. It automatically goes to the next field, which is the height. We're going to type in 50 and press enter. And then the angle is 0. You can click or just type in 0 and click enter. So once again, holding the Shift key and the right mouse button, I'm going to drag the view so that it rotates slightly so we can see what we're looking at here. And I'm going to uncheck the base reference planes. I'm going to hide those just by unchecking that box. This kind of cleans it up so we can see what's going on. Now, we're ready to begin to drag this into a 3D model. And to do that, all you have to do is take your cursor to the inside area, the light blue area, and click, and you're going to get these arrows. It doesn't matter which arrow you select the arrow and begin to drag with your mouse. Just move it in or out. And you can see we're now creating something in 3D. So I'm going to drag back into the screen, and as it goes back into the screen, I'm going to key in 10 millimeters and click enter. Now you can see it automatically put a dimension out there for the width. If you want to hide that, you would just go over here to PMI in the Pathfinder and uncheck that, and that would hide that dimension for you. We could also hide the base reference planes here in the middle. We don't need those right now. So we'll turn off the base coordinate system, sorry, not reference planes. And now we're ready to add maybe some rounding to the corners. So if you're unsure what a command does, you can take your cursor and just hover over that command, and you can see that it even gives us a little video of how that command works. So many of the commands have these little videos embedded to help you learn the product. So go ahead and click on round. And how this works is you click on the edges that you want to round. In this case, I'm going to click on these 4 edges. And once I have them selected, I'm going to key in 10 millimeters for the radius and press enter. Now you notice that we're still in this round command. If I want to get out of that command, you can either hit the select tool, press the select tool here on the screen, or you can hit escape on your keypad, and that will get you out of that command. So the next thing I want to do is I want to open up this front face and just have it what we call thin wall. So up here in the solids, you're going to see thin wall. Again, there's a little video. Those are going to be the open faces, so that's what we're going to do. You're going to click on thin wall command. The value for the thin wall is 4 millimeters. If yours says something else, you can click 4, but do not click enter. Just click tab. Okay, so that leaves you in the command, but allows you to change the value. And then you're going to click on the face to be open, which is this front face. And then you can right click to accept. So you can see here that I have this open face. Maybe you want to round some more edges. You can click on the round command. We're going to click on this edge, and you can see it still remembers that it was 10 millimeters, which is way too large for this edge. So I'm going to key in 1.5, and I'm going to click tab to stay in the command so that I can continue to click more edges. If you pressed enter and got out of the command, that's fine. You're still in the round command. You can just continue to click on edges that you want to chain to create those rounds. So you can see here as I rotate the view that I've rounded all of those outside edges and even this inside edge. The next step that I want to do is I want to create a hole for maybe a tether or a key ring on the inside. So I'm going to next click on the circle command. I'm going to draw a circle by center. I need to lock to a face of a part, which is going to be this inside face. So again, I can click on the little icon or press F3. Now I'm locked onto that face, so I'll go back to my top view. So I'm looking directly at that face. Now I want the hole to be lined up in the middle of that tag on the right side. So what I'm going to do is if I just touch any of these edges, and it doesn't matter which one, you can see I get a little blue dot next to the endpoints and the midpoint. So I'm just going to take my cursor up and touch that midpoint, and now as I drag my cursor to the left, you can see that it's maintaining alignment, that it highlights, and I get that little dotted line showing me that I'm on the midpoint, that I'm lined up with the midpoint. So I'm just going to come out here a little ways and click. And now I'm going to start dragging out a circle. In my case, I want this to be a 5 millimeter diameter circle. So I can just key in 5 and press enter. Now if I want to specify exactly where that is inside that face, I could add a dimension. And you can do that using the Smart Dimension tool. So I'm going to click on the Smart Dimension tool. I'm going to select the hole, or the circle in this case, and an edge. So maybe this outside edge. And you can see it's giving me a dimension for the height. That's not what I want. If you take your cursor and drag down, that's the dimension that I want to change. And let's make that about 14 millimeters and press enter. And you can see it will shift and move that 14 millimeters from the outside edge to the location of that hole. Hit escape to get out of the dimensioning command. Hold the shift, right mouse button and drag. So again, I'm rotating the view slightly. so that I can see that circle inside that face. Now, to begin creating the hole, all I have to do is move my cursor inside the circle to that blue face. When it highlights, I can click, and I click the arrow. If I pull out, I'm adding a pin, which is not what I want to do. You want to push it into the part to actually create the hole. Once it goes all the way through, you can just click, and that will generate the hole in the part. Okay. Again, you may want to hide that PMI dimension, so I can just uncheck it. Now in this case, I just scrolled my mouse wheel. That actually does a zoom also. Control and Shift, right mouse button, I can pan. Now I'm ready to add my name into the middle of that name tag. And we're going to do that by going over to the Sketching tab. So you're going to click on Sketching tab, and all the way to the right, you're going to see Text Profile. We're going to be adding a text profile. You can select from a whole bunch of different fonts, whatever you have loaded on your machine. I have one for solid edge stencil. You should have this also. I'm going to set it to bold text. I also want the text to be about 10 millimeters tall. And then I just come down here into the text field and key in your name. I'm just going to put your name, but you obviously would put in your own name here. I'm going to click OK, and that's going to attach it to my cursor. Now, I want to place it on this face, so I can go ahead and lock to that plane. And maybe you want to define it, instead of from the upper left corner, I'm going to define it from the center. This will just make it a little bit easier for me to center this up. You can go ahead and go to a top view again by clicking on that top in the lower right corner so you can see it straight on. Now, if you want it to be a little bit larger, a little bit smaller, depending on the length of your name, you can go back up here to this quick bar, we call it. Go back to the text profile step. It'll reopen that text profile. In this case, maybe I want to change it to 12. I have space, so I'm going to add and make it a little bit larger. Again, so then I'm just going to randomly place it out here. I'm going to make it off center on purpose here, just to show you how you get it back in the middle. If I want that to be centered with that hole, I could come over here to our Relate under Sketching. I'm still on the Sketching tab. Under the Relate group, there's a horizontal and vertical relate. All I need to do is pick up the midpoint of an edge here. So I have this kind of this bounding box around my text. I'm going to find its midpoint just by moving the cursor down until it highlights. I'm going to take that midpoint, and if I just drag my cursor over that circle, it'll show me where the center point is. And then I'll move my cursor to that center point, and when it highlights, I'm going to click. And that's going to align that text to be centered in the name tag. Now there is nothing to align to here because we need to be off center because of the hole. So that's just going to be by eyeball. Okay. So again, I'm going to shift right mouse button click to kind of rotate the view so I can see it in 3D. Might scroll it one time with the scroll wheel on my mouse. Now I'm going to go ahead and click escape to get out of the text profile. And now what I want to do is I want to extrude this into a solid. I want to emboss this text on this face. So you're going to go back to the Home tab. Select the extrude command. In this case, instead of selecting face, you want to change the option to single. If you just take your cursor down, it will highlight all of that text at once. Select it, right click to accept, and you can see as I drag my cursor out, it's extruding that outward. So we're going to be extruding out, and you're going to come out 2 millimeters. Just key in 2, press enter. Again, you can uncheck PMI to hide that dimension that gets added automatically. So here's your name. Now if you want to change the colors, you can do that. If you go to the View tab and over here in Part Painter command, I'm going to make the body any color I want. So maybe I want to make the body, let's go with a copper color. So if I find copper, I have it set to body, and I pick on that, and you can see it becomes this copper color. But now maybe the text I want to be a different color, so I could pick again from my list here. I could select a different color. Maybe let's go with teal. And in this case, instead of body, I'm going to change it to feature, because that text is a feature. It is a protrusion. This protrusion too. So you can either select it from the Pathfinder, or you can select it graphically. It will find that feature, and when you click on it, that feature will become that color. So now we have our name tag. If you want to make some adjustments, you can do that using Solid Edge's synchronous technology. And what that means is if I click on a face, and you can see that I have this design intent panel, I'm going to move this out of the way. We designed this centered about the base coordinate system, and one thing that Solid Edge will find automatically is symmetry, which means if I click on this arrow to change the height of this box or this rectangle, you can see that it changes symmetrically. So if I want it to be a little bit shorter, I could just drag it downward and click or key in a value. If I need it to be taller, of course I could be taller. In my case, I'm just going to pull it down a little bit. Let's come down about 8 millimeters, which is really 16 millimeters smaller because it went in both directions. Let's say I want to change the radius value. You can see here I have a 10 millimeter. I want that to be a little bit tighter. Let's make that 6 millimeters. So you can see I have a smaller radius now in the corners. Maybe you want to add an angle. If you click on this and you grab the origin of what we call the steering wheel, and if I take it down to an edge or take it down to the center of the hole, let's do that. To the center of the hole, you just touch the edge of the circle and it will snap to the center of the hole. Now you can see this torus on the steering wheel. If I click on the torus of the steering wheel and begin moving my cursor, you can see that I can add an angle if I want to. So let's do that. I'm just going to pull this out. Let's go about 3 degrees. In my case, I'm keying in -3 degrees. Okay, maybe I want to add an angle to this end face. I could do the same thing. I'm going to click on the face. I'm going to move the origin of the steering wheel to the center of that round. And in this case, I'm going to point the arrow up just by clicking on the little blue ball. And then I'm going to click on the torus, because that's going to allow me to adjust that by moving my cursor above the steering wheel. So maybe I want to tip this out. Let's go out 25 degrees. Now that I've done that, I also want to pull it in, so I could grab this arrow, click and drag, and start pulling this in. I'm just going to come in 10 millimeters. So you can make all kinds of edits to this part just by clicking and dragging and changing values, rotating faces. You can make all different kinds of designs for your part. Once you have it the way you like it, you may want to 3D print this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save this part. I have a folder already defined for these. I've made a couple of them. So I'm just going to create a new one called My Name Tag. And I'm putting it in this beginner exercise folder, and then I just click the save button. So that saves my part. You can see the name up here at the top. It's mynametag.par. And now I'm ready to maybe 3D print this. So from the application button, you can go to 3D print. When you click on preview, it'll show you the layout of that part inside the machine. It's going to show you how big of a machine you need, or how big the footprint is of your name tag, to make sure that it will fit on your particular 3D printer. I'm going to change the file type to STL. That's the most common file type for creating 3D prints. You can go into the options if you want, and here you can set up different kinds of options, whether you want it to be fine or coarse or whatever the case may be. I have mine set to a custom, which is just, we're just going to leave that alone. Click OK, and then all I have to do is export this. It's going to export to the same file name, but it's going to have an STL extension, and I'm going to save that. Now that STL file is what you would send to the 3D printer to go ahead and print this out. So let's just go back to the model. I'm just going to click this back arrow here, and at this point you have completed the exercise. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you will do more things with Solid Edge.